If you want to be at the top of your game, you cannot miss the UT Austin Portugal 2021 Annual Conference. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines resilience as the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. In the fight against COVID-19, the word resilience has been frequently used in narratives where the emphasis is placed on the encounter and interaction of different scientific disciplines to understand complex problems better and empower societies to face disturbances as windows of opportunities. Although the interplay between different disciplines is not a novelty, it became more acute in the past 2 centuries. Science has turned into an open space where knowledge communities, sometimes conflicting or contradictory, come together to solve multi-layered puzzles. Reality is far too complex to be approached through a single angle or fit in a single knowledge compartment. Connecting the dots, interdisciplinarity as a way to build up resilience. We picked our largest event to discuss how interdisciplinarity in science is helping societies become more resilient. An exciting and comprehensive agenda, packed with inspirational thought leaders and an innovative mix of presentation-like sessions, lively discussions, and hands-on exercises that will keep you on the edge of your seat.
Welcome to the UT Austin Portugal's 2021 Annual Conference. This year, live from the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Porto, we invite our international community to connect the dots and explore how interdisciplinarity paves the way to build up resilience in today's society. To officially launch our 2 half-day event, João Falcão e Cunha, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Porto. Welcome.
Good afternoon, in Portuguese, boa tarde, for the ones who are here or are together with us, so you can learn 2 Portuguese words. I'd like to welcome you to the School of Engineering at the University of Porto. It's an honor to be here and to help to host this event. I'd like to welcome our Minister, Professor Manuel Heitor. Is not here now, but he will be here, and he has been always here in this program from the start. Also, Professor Elena Prudeira, President of FCT, welcome. I don't know if you are listening to my words. I hope so, and I would like to welcome you to FELP, even if you are not physically here. I'd also like to compliment Professor José Manuel Mendonça, who's the Portuguese counterpart for managing this program, and Professor John Eckert, who's listening also, I hope, to me now. I think, I've said it, I think it's a very important and stimulating program for all the organizations involved, and for all the people involved in Portugal and at UT Austin. I think this image of connecting the dots, I think there are many dots, many important dots in this program, and they are becoming better dots, or better people and better organizations because of the program. I would like also to show that it's good for us to collaborate and cooperate with UT Austin, and we are getting better, and as an engineering school, we are also part of a network in Portugal called the Consortium of Engineering Schools. It's called CEE in Portuguese, and I appreciate if the technical support could show the presentation and share the presentation very few slides of this consortium. I used to be the coordinator from the start. My colleague Pedro Areas from the University of Minho, the School of Engineering, is going to replace me as the coordinator. And I'm saying this to wait for the presentation to show up so you can see the information I would like to share with you. But if I can't, I will tell you. The consortium includes 6 engineering schools of Portugal, the School of Engineering of Porto, the School of Science and Technology of the University of Coimbra, of University Nova of Lisbon, the University of Aveiro, and okay, they are showing, so I don't need to tell. But we together are involved in this consortium, the UT Austin Portugal Consortium, and if we were together a school and we appeared in the rankings, we would be in this position according to the essential science indicators related to 1217. I'm sure now the consortium will be better, and I can say it's an open consortium in engineering, so we can welcome. The consortium welcomes other schools of engineering. This is the citation, this is the number of papers, scientific papers published, and this is the citation. We are next to the IITs in India, which is a network of about 15 very good institutions. My best wishes for this event, and I hope that everyone participating will be better, and mostly that the contribution to society and to the economy, also on something that is really important, which is sustainability, the environment, the economy and society, will benefit from not only this event, but from the collaboration between all the people and all the organizations that are working together. And if you remember something important from these 2 days in 10 years' time, it's even more important. Thank you very much, and congratulations on everyone that is here and everyone that is participating in the program and in this event. Thank you very much, and best wishes.
Thank you for your words. We will now hear José Manuel Mendonça, UT Austin Portugal's National Director.
Good afternoon, all of you, those who are present in the auditorium and those which are following remotely. I would like to leave you with a few thoughts and also a few thanks, which are always due. Although an ocean and a few hours apart, Portugal and UT Austin have come together to organize once more the largest knowledge-sharing event of the program, the annual conference. This year, we chose to discuss how interdisciplinarity in science is shaping societies to become more resilient, that's to be able to cope with adversity and distress and come out stronger from crisis. Connecting the dots. What does it take to make sense from different perspectives and angles, to advance knowledge and build transformative solutions for complex problems? Real world is multidisciplinary in problems and very complex problems. What has the pandemic era taught us about the drivers and challenges of interdisciplinary research? What competencies and skills are needed to bring together disciplines that may seem in direct opposition, like exact science and social sciences, for example? And when and how does society benefit from interdisciplinary collaboration in science? These are some of the questions we will be exploring throughout these 2.5 days with the help of our panel of thought leaders and experts from our community and further beyond also. To them and to our host, the School of Engineering of the University of Porto, and we have the privilege to have the Dean with us today, our most sincere gratitude for the time they devoted to helping us put together this conference for our transatlantic community. Words of appreciation are always also due to our advanced master's class coordinators and speakers, and to the many authors of the e-posters we are proudly displaying today on our e-poster gallery. I would also like to thank the FCT and President Elena Prudeira for the sponsorship of the program, but also for all the support in overcoming the inevitable bureaucratic constraints. And John Eckert, Marco Bravo, and our UT Austin colleagues for their committed role in this exciting partnership. To the UT Austin Portugal team for their tireless, high-quality work in organizing this event. Thank you, Andrea, Rui, and thank you all. And finally, a word for Minister Manuel Heitor, which will be here with us in the closing, the visionary founder of the FCT International Partnerships with UT Austin, MIT, and CMU almost 15 years ago. Thank you for the initiative, for all the support, and for being here with us. At this point, it's never too much to say that the UT Austin Portugal Program has become, in its own right, a meeting point, an open space for inter-community collaboration around important societal challenges and emerging scientific questions. It has done so by bridging different knowledge areas and identifying common ground towards scientific breakthroughs and transformative science-based change. This year, many of you are still joining us at distance. We are really looking forward to meeting you face-to-face next year to celebrate the 15th anniversary of a joint venture which has been successfully connecting the dots between Portuguese research and innovation community and the University of Texas at Austin for over a decade, exactly as our Faculty of Engineering Dean has noted. Much has already been achieved, but we firmly believe we can still attain so much more in the years to come by continuing to break down knowledge silos and involving companies and the society in our common effort. For the time being, simply enjoy the next hours with us. We will seize the moment together with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now hear John Eckert. He is UT Austin Portugal's principal investigator at UT Austin and is joining us from Texas. Good morning, John.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Really want to thank Porto for hosting this event. And so welcome from Austin. And I wish I could be telling you welcome to this meeting while I was in Porto, but it's not this year. So I'm so pleased to represent the University of Texas at Austin, along with co-PI and executive director Marco Bravo, and all the work that he does and others do on behalf of building this program. So I'm not going to go over all of what's in the program, but I wanted to make a few points I think that are important in that we've been focusing over this last year on the research that in the areas of air and space, medical physics, high performance computing, and nanomaterials. And we've been advancing our economies. The focus is on sustainability, as we've heard, and advancing our economies through impactful research with translation partners. We always have an eye toward commercialization, and this is done because of the structure that this the UT Austin Portugal Research Alliance has, where research translation partners are brought into this. We've started podcasts to communicate our research results, that we've been running short courses. There've been advanced training sessions held on our campus here at UT Austin for the TAC internships, and with relaxing travel restrictions that are relaxing of travel restrictions between our countries and international travel. We really look forward over this coming year to student exchanges and exchanges of scientists so that we can take our collaborations and the impact of our work and move it to the next level. So I'm going to, and I also want to thank FCT for their generous support. So I'm going to hand the microphone back so that we can stay on schedule. Thank you again, and welcome to this annual review. Thank you.
Thank you. To close the opening session, Elena Prudeira, President of FCT, the Portuguese Foundation of Science and Technology.
Good afternoon, boa tarde a todos. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm not speaking from Texas, but just from Lisbon. It is a pleasure to be here with you in this opening session of this annual meeting. We are very, very happy and very glad that our funding of this partnership is giving really fruitful outcomes. As you know, Portugal and the science in Portugal has made a bet that we could increase highly our performance and our scientific outputs at various levels if we connected strongly and tightly with very good international organizations like universities, especially those in the United States. And this was done almost 15 years ago with several consortia, and UT Austin was one of the first, so almost 15 years ago. And we are very glad that, in fact, we were right and that we have fruits from this cooperation. Nowadays, we integrate these programs in an overall reference program that we call Go Portugal, where we include these partnerships together with a new partnership related to the development involving the Aga Khan Foundation. And with that, we hope to structure our collaborative structured organization with foreign excellence centers. And in fact, we have very good results. UT Austin is really a very good example of such fruitful cooperation. The name of this annual meeting, so the Connecting the Dots, is a clever one, because there are several dots. Let me strike three of them. So you have aspects of advanced for education, advanced formation, master's and PhD programs. You have research, so where you develop new ideas and gain new knowledge, both at an exploratory level or at a more advanced and structured level. And you have innovation and entrepreneurship. So what we want is that to enlarge these dots, of course, so we enrich them, but also to improve the connections. So we need, I think it is my strong belief that we need to interconnect all these dots in order to have a more mature and more smart and efficient network. That's what we all want, and I'm sure during these work days you are going to have, you will certainly focus on how you have filled in the dots and how you have connected them. And next year, when we will be celebrating your 15th anniversary, I think we can really see how this connection and this enrichment was made. I will finish by greeting my colleagues in this opening ceremony. Yes, João Falcão e Cunha, I heard your words in the beginning. I was here. And I also greet José Manuel Mendonça and John Eckert. It's a pleasure to be with you, even if it is on screen. And I am sure that next year we will be physically together and enjoy this round number of 15 years of putting together research, advanced education and innovation and entrepreneurship, and as José Manuel Mendonça stressed, linking different areas of knowledge, This is also an important point, which I'm sure we need to further develop in the next future. So linking everything from exact sciences to engineering sciences to social and humanities, and linking research to innovation and entrepreneurship. So I wish you all a very fruitful work. I'm sure you will do, and I will be following you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's time to move on to one of the highlights of this year's conference, our fireside chat.
Over the past year, modeling and data analysis have been in the public eye as never before. The media have brought mathematical and advanced computational predictive models to our attention that would normally be reserved for scientists' fora. Although sometimes wrongly taken for crystal balls, modeling tools have become a prominent part of the COVID-19 outbreak response, providing decision-makers relevant insights on the pandemic dynamics, the shielding effect of vaccination, or the individual's response to social isolation. They have also shown us that the fight against any pandemic calls for a full, comprehensive, interdisciplinary approach, involving experts from a wide range of fields. Why? Because these models are but a first attempt to better understand and cope with a situation with many layers of complexity and multiple effects, yet requiring integrated action. Lauren Meyers is the founding director of the University of Texas COVID-19 Modeling Consortium, an interdisciplinary network of researchers and health professionals building models to detect, forecast, and control COVID-19. This pioneer agent in network epidemiology will talk us through her own experience, connecting the dots of different knowledge fields to develop solutions for public health challenges using mathematical concepts. A fascinating journey into how we can make sense out of a patchy data and different angles towards improvements in human welfare. A compelling interview conducted by Elizabeth Fernandez, Head of Audience Insights and Analytics at the Portuguese newspaper Público.
To conduct this session, let's call Elizabeth Fernandez on stage. She is the Head of Analytics and Audience Insights at the Portuguese newspaper Público. She created the Analytics department and led the organization's data strategy. By combining communication strategies and strong relationships with stakeholders, Elizabeth started to build a more data-driven culture. Her team supports all departments, turning data into information, information into insights, and insights into business decisions. Elizabeth, the floor is yours now.
Thank you for the presentation and for this opportunity to be here with you. So I would like to present Professor Lauren Meyers. He is the Colley Centennial Professor of Integrative Biology and Statistics and Data Science at the University of Texas at Austin and a member of the Santa Fe Institute External Faculty. Professor Meyers studied math and philosophy as an undergraduate at Harvard University and received a PhD in mathematical biology from Stanford University. She has been a pioneer in the field of network epidemiology and the application of machine learning to improve outbreak detection, forecasting, and control. Professor Meyers leads an interdisciplinary team of scientists, engineers, and public health experts in uncovering the social and biological drivers of epidemics and building practical tools for the CDC and other global health agencies to track and mitigate emerging vital threats, including COVID-19, pandemic influenza, Ebola, HIV, and Zika. Professor Meyers' research has been published in over 100 peer-reviewed articles in major journals and covered by the popular press, including Wall Street Journals, New York Times, and others. Professor Meyers was named as one of the top 100 global innovators under age 35 by the MIT Technology Review in 2004 and received the Joseph Lieberman Award for significant contributions to science in 2017. Professor Meyers, welcome. We are proud to have you with us. Hi, Professor. We know that you'd like to share some insights into your experience navigating interdisciplinarity to find solutions for public health challenges. So we'll be very pleased to hear from you now. Then I will invite for a fireside chat, me and the audience. So we would like to see your presentation and to listen from you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy and honored to be here with you today. I wish I could actually be in Portugal, maybe next time. I'm going to share my screen and spend just a few minutes giving you sort of a tour of the work that we've been doing leading up to and throughout the COVID pandemic. I am not able to share my screen. Is it possible to enable that? Okay, looks like it's going to work now. Okay. So in many ways, I have been planning for the COVID-19 pandemic my entire career. I've been on the faculty of UT Austin for almost 20 years. And throughout that period of time, I've been building models to help us understand how infectious diseases emerge, spread, and working very closely with public health agencies to help them think about what we need to do in the face of future threats. And what you see on your screen right now is a video of a model that we developed right after the 2009 H1N1 pandemic to help the state of Texas think about planning for future pandemics. And in this model, we allow the user, the state agency, to simulate any kind of pandemic they want. They can specify how quickly it spreads, how silently it spreads, how deadly it is. They can watch the pandemic unfold throughout Texas. They can deploy different kinds of interventions, vaccinations, antiviral drugs, school closures, and watch how the mitigation strategies may or may not impact the spread. One of the really interesting things about this model that we developed in around 2011 is it also allows the user, the planner, to watch a pandemic unfold through the lens of a noisy surveillance system, an imperfect data collection system, where you can't see every case, every death that happens. You only get to see a subset of them. And it gives them an opportunity to practice making decisions, practice enacting interventions in the face of imperfect, incomplete information. So and this is a picture of the exact same model being used, being demonstrated in UT's Visualization Lab, which is a resource that's actually provided by the Texas Advanced Computing Center. And we developed a version of this model so that groups of planners could come into the Viz Lab and collectively use the simulation to practice responding to future pandemic threats. And this is one of my former postdoc graduate students demonstrating it to visitors from other universities, from the NIH, from the CDC, probably around 2012, 2013. So in the months leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually had a contract with the CDC to essentially develop this model and develop other planning tools on a national scale. So we had sort of piloted the project in Texas, and it was time to build it up to the United States. And we had a contract, and it was in conjunction with contracts to 4 other modeling teams from around the world. And the CDC's idea was that we need a national resource of models different models developed by different experts. No one model is perfect, but we'll use this ensemble of models to think through what future threats may have in store, what kinds of strategies are going to be most resilient in the face of sort of unknown and imperfect information. And we were about, I would say, 70–80% of the way through developing this national scale model when COVID emerged. And the CDC reached out to the modeling community, to the 5 groups that were involved in this effort, but really all modelers, around the country, and asked us to rapidly recalibrate our models, help them understand this newly emerging threat, and help them figure out what would be effective mitigation strategies in the United States. So we immediately went to work. And as the requests started pouring in from the CDC, from other federal agencies, from local and state agencies, we quickly realized that we didn't have enough people, enough hours in the day to do the analysis that were needed, especially in those first few weeks and months of the pandemic. And so we very rapidly established what's now the UT Austin COVID-19 Modeling Consortium. It's a loosely connected network of dozens of collaborators from across UT, from across many institutions in the United States and around the world, across disciplines. There are experts in biological sciences, epidemiology, engineering, statistics, machine learning, AI, social sciences, that have all been sort of organically collaborating as projects, as requests arise, to do analysis, to help us understand the threat and help us understand what are good strategies for combating the threat. And this is a subset of the individuals who have been working collectively throughout the pandemic. So roughly speaking, we have been modeling prior to COVID and throughout COVID to achieve 3 different goals, 3 different modeling goals. The first goal is to use models, to use statistics, to use math, to use engineering to help us understand the threat. How is it spreading? Where is it spreading? Who is at risk? The second goal is to forecast the threat. Once we have some kind of handle on the nature of the beast, what can we say about where it is going to be spreading, who may be affected in coming days, weeks, or even months? And finally, and arguably most importantly, we use our models, we use our toolkit to help decision makers figure out good strategies for using limited resources or costly measures to contain the threat. And I'm going to very briefly give you kind of a taste of what I mean and how we've done these things during COVID. So from day one, we heard about this anomalous new virus spreading in the food markets of Wuhan, probably around the same time that you did. We heard about it in the news in early January of 2020. And from really the hour that we heard about this, we got to work. And one of the very first studies we conducted, really started within a day of hearing about this new threat, was a study just to, again, characterize the threat, help us understand just answers to very basic questions. We didn't even know if this was human to human transmissible. So was this virus spreading from human to human? If so, how quickly was it spreading? How many people had already been infected in Wuhan? Had the virus already expanded beyond Wuhan or beyond even China? And at that point in time, in those early weeks in the pandemic, it was very hard to know if the data coming out of China were reliable. So we developed a model that allowed us to triangulate and answer some of those very basic questions using data that we thought were more reliable. And that was the date and the time of the first 18, 19 cases that were identified outside of China. So the first case in Thailand, immediately thereafter, there were cases in Seattle and Sydney and Chicago and Tokyo. So we basically, we built a model that said, well, the virus is spreading at some exponential rate in Wuhan, and we wanted to infer what that rate is. In order to do that, we said, well, how fast must it be spreading for us to have already seen a case in Seattle by this date and already seen a case in Taipei by this date? And what we knew was the dates and times of those cases. And we also had very comprehensive data on air travel in and out of Wuhan to every city in the world. So using that information, we were able to estimate that by January 22nd, when China locked down Wuhan and had only reported 425 total cases, there were probably somewhere around 12,000, 12,500 cases that had occurred in Wuhan. And what you see in that graph is the reported cases in black and our estimates of what probably was the true prevalence and the rise in prevalence over that early period. We also estimated, using cell phone mobility data that tracked almost 1 billion people and how they traveled in a typical daily basis in China, we also estimated that the virus had probably arrived in over 150 cities before that Wuhan lockdown. And what transpired in the weeks that followed was basically validation that indeed that virus had already spread quite a ways in Wuhan and had already arrived in many cities that had outbreaks underway that didn't realize it until a few weeks later. The second and arguably most alarming study for us during the pandemic was one that we started by early February. And this was a point in time of 2020. This is a point in time where we really still didn't understand the basic characteristics of the virus. And we wanted to know in particular what the serial interval of the virus is. And what is a serial interval? Well, the serial interval is if I get infected and then I infect you, it is the number of days between me first feeling symptoms and you first feeling symptoms. So that tells us something about the pace of transmission. If it takes 2 weeks for me to infect somebody, it's easier to track down people and contain an outbreak than if it only takes a few days between when I get sick and I infect you. And so at this point in time, we didn't know what that serial interval was, and there really wasn't very good data for us to estimate that from. And so we worked with a team of Chinese graduate students to scrape the websites of the health departments from 18 different provinces in China, looking for case reports that would allow us to estimate what that serial interval is. So this would be a case report where somebody had been diagnosed with COVID. The on-the-ground investigators were able to sort of identify who most likely infected them and also reported when that person first felt symptoms. So we had an infectee, an infector, and the dates of symptoms. We ended up finding about 450 case reports from those first weeks of the pandemic. And we did something very simple. We just built a histogram based on those case reports. And that's what you see here is a distribution of serial intervals. And there were essentially 3 very alarming things that jumped out at us when we built this histogram. The first was that this is a very fast spreader, that the average serial interval was about 4 or 5 days. So I develop symptoms, I infect you, and you're already feeling symptoms 4 or 5 days after I first feel sick. At that point in time, a lot of us were assuming that this virus would behave a lot like the first SARS virus. And this disabused us of that notion. The first SARS virus had a serial interval of about 8 days. So this was spreading at about twice as fast. This was spreading, it took about half the serial interval for somebody to infect somebody else. So this was a very fast spreader. It was going to be much harder to contain than that first SARS virus from 2003, 2004. The second alarming observation was that there was a long tail on this distribution, that we would have to isolate people for quite a while or quarantine people who might have been exposed for quite a while to ensure that they didn't go out and infect people after they looked like they were feeling better. But really, by far, the most alarming observation was these negative serial intervals. What is a negative serial interval? Well, that was a case report where the infectee started feeling symptoms before the infector. That meant that I was spreading the virus to you before I even knew I was sick, before I had symptoms. And this was really one of the first studies to provide evidence of what we now unfortunately know so well, is that this is a fast and a silent spreader. Very often people are spreading the virus to other people without even knowing they're sick. When we shared the simple histogram with our colleagues in the CDC, other scientists across the world, their initial reaction was, you must have made a mistake. And within days, we validated this study, and other studies came out of data in China that confirmed what we now know to be true. So those were a couple examples of modeling to help us characterize the threat. We also have done quite a bit of modeling quite a bit of technology development to allow us to forecast the threat. And the very first request we got to make sort of a long-term projection of what was going to happen with this virus came directly from the White House Coronavirus Task Force. They sent an urgent email to a number of modeling groups around the country and around the world with very early in the pandemic, this was probably March of 2020, asking us to project how many people were going to die from the coronavirus during 2020. And our answer to that request, and they had like a 24-hour turnaround on it, our answer to that request was, there is no way we can forecast this because it will fundamentally depend on the policies we put in place and the way people behave. And we simply don't have a crystal ball for those things. So we're not going to provide a forecast for you. What we will do is we'll give you some scenario projections, some if-then projections. So, and this is what our projections look like. If we lock down, fully lock down, and or figure out ways to really contain the spread, really slow the transmission of this virus, which by now we knew was spreading fast and silently, then we could limit mortality so that no more than 50,000 people die in 2020. If we don't do anything, if we just let this thing spread completely unmitigated, we expect that there will be well over 1 million deaths in the United States from COVID in 2020. And if we do something in between, which is essentially the roller coaster that we all rode in 2020 and now in 2021, we projected that there would be somewhere between 200,000 and 600,000 deaths, depending on what sorts of policies would be put in place. And if by the end of 2020, the US reported around 344,764 cases. But in fact, when you look at excess mortality, we realize that there was probably quite a few deaths that were not reported, and those estimates look closer to 522,000. So that was our first sort of foray into forecasting using a very simple model that we had in hand at the time. But over the intervening 18 months, we have put a lot of time and effort into building much more sophisticated models that actually do make forecasts. They make forecasts usually 2, 3, 4, maybe at most 4 weeks out, because we simply don't have that crystal ball about behavior. And so this is really just based on current trends in behavior. What you see on your screen now is a screenshot from the CDC's forecasting ensemble. We are just one of dozens of groups that have developed really powerful forecasting models and contributed them to this national resource. The CDC has been doing something that's, very sort of wise and not looking at any one of these models, but really looking at these models as a whole to get a sense of kind of what might be coming and the uncertainty on our forecasts, and doing something called ensembling, which is basically taking sort of an average of what all these different models are telling us. Finally, I will just mention briefly that we have spent most of our time doing modeling to support decision-making. And we've been doing it on all different scales, but really a lot of our effort has been focused very locally on supporting decision-making in Austin, Texas. And if you haven't been to Austin, Texas, this is one of the really nice photos of our downtown area and the lake or river that runs through central Austin. So we are, a large city. We are, the metropolitan area is now over 2 million people. We are the fastest growing large city in the United States. And we are also a city that has chronic historic segregation and disparities that have plagued the COVID experience throughout the pandemic. So we've been working very closely with city officials. We've been working closely with the University of Texas, with school districts, with other community organizations to provide situational awareness and do analyses to help support everyday decisions that have been happening over the almost 2 years now. I'll just mention one of the most impactful modeling activities we've done, and that is working with the city on their executive COVID task force to develop and maintain and pressure test the staged alert system that has been guiding COVID policy from May of, or actually April of 2020. So this is a screenshot of the city's own dashboard. It's tracking our 7-day rolling average of COVID hospital admissions. And when those numbers, when that 7-day average crosses between these different color bands, the city tightens measures if we're going up, and it relaxes measures when we're going down. And so behind the scenes, what our modeling consortium has done is helped to develop this entire system. So we help to answer the question at the outset of what data do we track? Do we track cases? Do we track deaths? Do we track hospitalizations? And through sort of a very rigorous analysis, we identified this rolling average of hospital admissions as the most reliable real-time indicator of recent transmission and imminent hospital surge. And we also, using sophisticated numerical optimization techniques, using the high performance computing resources at the Texas Advanced Computer Center, using a model that couples, that looks at mobility patterns, look at transmission patterns, look at hospital data. We used this sort of very complex model, these really extensive resources, ran millions and millions of simulations to derive what those thresholds should be. So when should we transition from orange, which is sort of a tight lockdown, to red, which is a full lockdown, and come back out of that? And so those thresholds are based on extensive analysis, extensive optimization. And this stage system has served us fairly well throughout the pandemic. So it was the optimization criteria were that we wanted thresholds that would ensure that we never exceed our local ICU capacity, so that we slow down transmission before we get to the point where we run out of our healthcare resources, but at the same time, minimize the number of days we spend under restrictive measures. So that's our socioeconomic goal, is to keep things as open as possible, to maximize the time we spend in green and blue and orange, and minimize the time in yellow, and minimize the time in orange and red. And so for the most part, until recently, we were able to manage the healthcare capacity so that we didn't exceed our ICU beds. We also managed to spend the least amount of time under these restrictive lockdowns in comparison to all other major cities in Texas. And we also have managed to keep our overall mortality in Austin to less than half the statewide average, much lower than the other major metropolitan areas in Texas. Unfortunately, though, when we dig a little bit deeper, we see that even in a city like Austin, which has done a pretty good job of data-driven, scientifically grounded decision-making, there are really catastrophic disparities. So these are maps of Austin where you see our 40-something different zip codes. In the lower left, you see a map of Austin colored by the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. So the purple zip codes are our vulnerable zip codes, and the brown zip codes are our less vulnerable zip codes. And you can see there's a very strong east-west divide. And East Austin, many of those zip codes are majority Latino. West Austin, they're almost all majority white. So you can see there's a strong racial ethnic segregation as well. And when you look at the other maps, you can see that the burden and access to resources, access to vaccines falls very much along that same east-west divide, with lower vaccine coverage in East Austin on the lower right, much higher cumulative mortality in East Austin in the upper right. And this is just the most recent hospital admissions falling disproportionately in those eastern zip codes. So finally, I will just close by saying, in response to a question posed by the New York Times in an article that came out earlier in the pandemic, the question that was posed to me and several other experts was, what have we learned? What do we need to do differently in the next pandemic? And my response was that we need to really, in thinking about future pandemics and even thinking about future years of battling COVID, we need to prepare for what we can't imagine. We must overcome our collective failure of imagination. Even though I've been working in the field of pandemic preparedness for my entire career, for over 20 years, COVID-19 took me by surprise. It took all the experts, all the public health and global health agencies by surprise. We spent decades planning for a pandemic that would resemble the viruses we already knew, especially influenza. We didn't plan for face masks. We didn't plan for mass testing, and we still haven't managed to fully harness that very effective strategy. We didn't plan for stay-home orders, for politicized decision-making or devastating racial disparities. And looking forward, we need to prepare for a much broader range of threats. So thank you for giving me time to present some of our work, and I really look forward to this conversation.
Learn from this pandemic, and in 2013 in the Science of Pandemics conference, to the question, looking back, measuring pandemics in history, there is a way to predict or to be prepared to anything like that? And at that time Professor Meyers said, predict no, prepared yes. Were we really prepared for this pandemic?
Gosh, I don't remember saying that back in 2013, but I would say the same thing again today. It's hard to envision the possible universe of threats that we may face in the future, right? We didn't anticipate COVID. We didn't anticipate Zika. There's so many things, we didn't expect, and future viruses may look very different than, or future viral threats may look very different than the viruses we see today or we've seen in the past. But that doesn't mean that we can't prepare to effectively detect, effectively contain, and if we're not able to contain, effectively mitigate future threats. But that requires envisioning plausible threats. Maybe we won't know exactly what's going to come our way, but really thinking about different scenarios, not just what is the virus going to look like, but what is the human response and the human experience and the global response and the socio-political response going to look like, right? It's not just the virus, but it's what do we do in the face of that virus? And so we really need to be thinking about a much wider range of scenarios. We need to be using science and what data we have to really rigorously simulate how those scenarios may play out in multiple different dimensions, and use those kinds of simulations, those kinds of scenarios to make plans, to build more effective data collection systems so we can detect the threats earlier, to build more effective decision-making systems so that we can make decisions more quickly, more rapidly, more effectively. And so I would say, we may never be able to predict with certainty when, where, what kind of virus is going to be our next major threat, but we can be much, much more prepared. And to the question of were we really prepared for this one, I think the answer is no. I think that there are certainly things that we have in place. We have stockpiles in the United States. We had stockpiles of drugs for influenza, not drugs for COVID. We had, fortunately had this amazing technology and science underway to develop mRNA vaccines, but it's almost coincidental that we happen to have it. And there was someone who had been working on it for coronaviruses, right? So there were things that we are very fortunate that we have in place, but there are so many things that we had them in place, we would have been much better off at the beginning and throughout the pandemic.
So soon researchers said that we need to use the masks and simple measures like that. And it took so much time to use the masks. What dots need to be connected in a new pandemic? What has to be made by media, governments, entities to better fight these kind of events and to quick take actions and take decisions?
Yeah, that is, our failure to identify masks and to even today embrace masks as a low cost or no cost measure that truly can save lives is really, I think, one of our, the failures of this pandemic. And I think that, as we plan for the future, we will continue to look back and learn lessons. We won't be so slow to embrace masks, hopefully next time. We'll realize that, ventilators are important, but even more important in the United States, our number one limiting resource is trained healthcare workers, right? We won't be so slow to realize that we need to protect our vulnerable populations, especially people living in nursing homes and long-term care facilities, right? I mean, so much of the early mortality fell catastrophically in those populations. So next, we will hopefully at least learn those lessons and have those sorts of measures, have testing, have surveillance, proactive testing as something we go to very quickly in our arsenal. But the challenge will be if we only look back and learn the lessons of COVID and learn the lessons of 2009 H1N1, we won't necessarily be ready for that future threat that looks different, right? As we were just talking about. And so, what is it going to take for us to think beyond the current collection of viruses in our current arsenal? I think it will take some of that, simulation of what might viruses look like, and that, like generating, synthesizing plausible viruses and what their characteristics might be and what it might take to contain them. But it also takes kind of revolutionizing the way we collect data, analyze data, and make data in real time when unexpected, uncertain threats arise, so that we can identify new kinds of strategies, new kinds of technologies that maybe we didn't anticipate when we were only looking back at the pandemics or the pathogens we've seen in the past.
Well, all the COVID investigation affected other investigations, other virus researches. There is positive and negative impacts in these other researches.
So how has COVID research impacted research in other areas? Well, I think in the short term, and this is, sort of reflecting on at least the world I can see in the short term, a lot of the work really interesting work that was happening on other viruses, and, in terms of preparing for and understanding the emergence of other kinds of outbreaks, it was put on hold while all of us kind of focused our efforts, focused our models, and focused just our mental bandwidth on COVID. And so, work on influenza, work on other respiratory viruses, work on HIV, work on malaria, work on tuberculosis, work on work on Zika and dengue, all of this other work. I think there are many researchers who kind of sideline that kind of research, at least temporarily, to, bring their expertise to bear on COVID, which made sense, right? We want our brightest minds working on our most pressing challenges when we need them. So in the short term, I would say probably there was a slowdown in some of that kind of research. But in the long run, I think that the scientific insights, the modeling technologies, especially like our medical technologies, our vaccine production, I think all of that will translate into advances in our understanding of ability to forecast, ability to mitigate other kinds of viral threats. And I think very slowly, many of us are starting to return to some of our other research interests, to thinking about other pressing public health and global health challenges.
Can help it to bring more investment for research?
So will the COVID, is this going to help invest more money, resources in research? Certainly in the short run, we are already seeing a huge influx of resources, of funding, at least, in the United States. The Congress, I think, allocated $500 million to set up a new forecasting and modeling center that will be in the CDC. The Rockefeller Foundation also is investing in a huge initiative to advance pandemic detection and forecasting. And so we are seeing right now a large amount of interest, a large amount of resources. But the challenge is going to be to kind of sustain that investment, to really use that to transform not necessarily the way we do science, but the way we bring science to public health and to equip public health to be more nimble, more resourced, more in touch with science and data in navigating future threats. And what I've seen over the course of my career, as I have, occasionally worked closely with public health during the first SARS crisis, the 2015 Ebola outbreaks, 2009 H1N1, Zika, West Nile virus incursions into Texas, there's a long list, is that in the past, there is a lot of interest in the immediate aftermath of a threat that then kind of loses steam. That, when Ebola became a crisis, we sort of stopped our flu pandemic work for a while, and we never returned to that. When Zika displaced Ebola, then when COVID displaced Zika, right? And so the challenge is to really come up with lasting investments, lasting resources, lasting infrastructure that will ensure that we are, more nimble, more prepared the next time we have a serious threat emerge.
So after these 2 years, close 2 years, we still have questions and a lot of mysteries. What are your next steps in your research? What are the questions that you like to answer in the next steps in your research?
Yeah, so, we have made enormous progress in understanding COVID and understanding its transmission dynamics, its severity and heterogeneity in severity, who gets sick, why gets sick. And we understand COVID at a level, I think there's few viruses we understand as deeply, but there is still, we really don't understand. And we're just constantly chasing about, in particular about immunity, right? So, what happens after someone's infected? What if they're infected asymptomatically? What if they have symptoms? How much immunity do they have? How does that wane? How much of that is immunity against infection versus against severe outcomes? How does that vary depending on your health, your age? Same questions following one vaccine, following two vaccines, following three vaccines, a booster for different vaccines. So, and these are critically important questions because they impact who we vaccinate, how much we loosen social distancing measures as immunity increases in a population, what we might expect. And so there's really fundamental questions about that. As far as, as far as like sort of the modeling goals that are kind of high on our list right now, one is really thinking about as COVID progresses from an immediate severe pandemic threat to what we hope, well, we wish it would go away, but assuming it's not going away, to what we hope will be a much more manageable, maybe endemic or seasonal threat, much less severe seasonal threat. The question is, how do we manage it to most effectively prevent morbidity, prevent mortality, and while protecting our socioeconomic well-being? So, I showed you that tiered alert system. That tiered alert system was developed for a severe threat, but maybe it makes sense to think about a tiered alert system to help us manage normal seasonal respiratory viruses, right? Seasonal influenza kills tens of thousands of people every year just in the US, right? And hundreds of thousands worldwide. Those are preventable deaths if maybe we got people to wear face masks for a few weeks every year. Maybe we got people to take more precautions, especially if you're in a high risk group, for a few weeks every year. So how can we take the lessons learned from COVID and really think about how do we better manage seasonal respiratory virus threats? And the other major challenge that I think we all need to tackle is how do we address these chronic disparities that have led to our socioeconomic vulnerable groups, racial ethnic minority groups having had such catastrophically high mortality, hospitalization rates throughout this pandemic. And that really is going to take some deep digging into identifying the overlapping vulnerabilities and mitigating those vulnerabilities that cause those disparities.
So we have here in the chat one question from Nichol Gentilal. The question is, which are the best tools to use, MATLAB, R, etc., when modeling this type of work?
That's a really great question. And I showed you the list of names and the picture of the consortium, which is dozens of researchers, and everybody uses whatever programming language they feel comfortable with, and often some of that choice is based on what kinds of libraries are available, what kinds of technology have already been developed by others in the group. But I will tell you that the most popular languages in that consortium are Python. There's lots and lots of my postdocs and students and collaborators who use Python for a lot of their modeling, R, and C++. But again, it's, you can build the same models in many different languages. And sometimes it's more important just to do what you feel like you're going to be most adept at using.
And the final two questions, because we are close to the end. How has the pandemic changed your career in the last 2 years? And if you could talk with that student that started a mathematics degree at Harvard University in 1991, what you'd like to tell her?
Those are great questions. So how has it changed my life? Well, as everybody's life has been changed. And, scientists who work on COVID, we worked 24/7 for months and months and months. And we worked on such time-sensitive problems and disseminated our work at such speed that, it's just a whole different pace, a whole different intensity, a whole different level of responsibility in making sure what we did right and rigorously. And that pace has slowed, but that was a very, very intense, period of my research career that I really hope we never face such a severe threat that will require that kind of intensity. And I'm just one of, thousands of scientists across the world who I think experienced that. If I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self something based on what I know now, I guess I would say, so I studied pure math and philosophy at Harvard. And the one thing I would have told that self is, hey, computing and data and statistics are the future. Take a few more of those courses. I would have told myself to do that, because a lot of what I've learned, I've had to learn on the fly, go back and retrain myself. And if I'd known that, I would have done a lot more. And I will tell you, my degrees in pure math and philosophy have served me well. But I would have just tacked on a bunch more classes in those more computational and data-oriented sciences. I would have told my 18-year-old self that in 2019, tell everybody that face masks are effective at stopping the spread of coronaviruses. I would have told myself to, in those years, in the early 2000s, in 2000 through 2020, as I worked with public health agencies and as I developed tools like that Texas dashboard I showed you earlier on, push harder on those colleagues to really ensure that they are thinking about science, that they are trained to use science, that they are trained to use data. Don't let those things slide, even when public health seems to lose interest or lose investment in it. It's so important that we maintain that and we prepare to use data and science in decision making. And finally, I think I would have just reinforced what I think I must have known at the time, because it is the career path I followed, which is that math is not only interesting in of itself, because it's so fascinating, but it is an incredible, powerful tool for unleashing knowledge in all sorts of subjects and in tackling grand challenges that we will face as a globe.
So, unfortunately, we are close to the end. I'd like to stay here more hours speaking and learning and listening. This is amazing to listen from you, Professor Meyers, but we need to close this session. I am really thankful to be here and to have this opportunity to speak with you and to share with all of us these learnings. So I'd like to close the session, and I wish you an excellent rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be with you all.
Think small. Really, really small. So small that what you are imagining cannot be seen through an optical microscope. You'll find yourself in the great, wonderful world of nanotechnology, one of the fastest moving and most disruptive areas of science today. Nanomaterials abound in living systems and nature, from insects to plants to ocean spray or volcanic ash. At the nanoscale, scientists are creating nanomaterials themselves that mimic some of those natural nanostructures towards disruptive solutions for some of the biggest challenges across a myriad of application areas. What is so special about working at the nanoscale is to see that matter acquires different and unique properties, such as higher strength, lighter weight, increased conductivity, or chemical reactivity that are extremely relevant to a wide range of solutions from medical devices to aircraft, food, or consumer electronics. Nanotechnologies allow for disruptive solutions for some of the biggest challenges across a myriad of application areas. The list is extensive and the impact is unprecedented. Join Lars Montilius, Luís Graça, Bruno Figueiredo, Alfredo Silva, and Filipe Fernandez for an exciting journey to the great, wonderful world of nano, during which we'll be stopping by some of the most promising nanotechnology-based projects UT Austin Portugal is supporting. This roundtable is not about science fiction. It's about today's science coupled with engineering towards a promising future.
Who will be moderating the session. Lars is the Director General of the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory and Professor of Nanotechnology at Lund University in Sweden. Lars, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And to all of you, very welcome to this session. As we heard from the introduction, this is all about connecting the dots, or connecting ourselves, if you like, and see what can we do that is really sustainable and also very important for the future of society, and do that through the scale of nanotechnology. And as the kind of title says, nanotechnology is all about how matters are organized in the nanoscale and how it will be orchestrated in the meter scale. So we, all of us, we are living nanomachines. All the things that happens in our bodies are governed by nanoscale reactions, and still we are visible in the meter scale. And this is the strength of nanotechnology, that by using the kind of special properties at the nanoscale, you can tailor-make and create, let's say, wonders for the future that will have a big possibility to be realized and make a big impact in society. So today we have with us a set of speakers that will cover, I would say, 4 different areas of science, or 4 different areas of sectors. And it's very interesting to hear what they will tell us and what they will share with us. So I will now start to introduce the first one. And the first one will be through a digital format, while the other 3 are really physical here, like me. So the first one is Luís Graça. He is the principal investigator at Instituto de Medicina Molecular João Lobo Antunes, IMM, in more used acronym, and a full professor at the University of Lisbon Medical School. Luís Graça leads the Cellular Immunology Lab at IMM and studies mechanisms that help to regulate antibodies production that can induce and maintain immune tolerance. Very, very trendy topic and a very hot topic. So please, Luís, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I don't know if you're already seeing what I'm presenting. Yes. Okay. So I want to share with you our projects. And all of us, literally probably all of us, passed through this experience in getting a vaccine today or this year. And what we already know from our experience with COVID-19 is that certain group of people, namely the elderly, the vaccine may not be as effective as with younger people. And this is well demonstrated with the need to provide booster doses for those with older age. And we are very interested in understanding what regulates the production of antibodies and the production of an effective immune response to vaccines and to infection. And it has been known for many years that the immune system has a combined action with different cells that act in a coordinated fashion, namely CD8 cells that became known as cytotoxic T cells, and CD4 cells that became known as helper cells because they help B cells to make antibodies. And this distinction between cytotoxic and helpers was taught in immunology courses by many years. And recently it was known that these helper cells, in fact, they can come in different flavors. So you can have helper 1 cells that help antibodies produce certain types of B cells produce certain types of antibodies, and Th2 cells that make B cells produce antibodies that are important to fight against parasites, and for many of us to make antibodies that are involved in allergic diseases. Now, what we know today is that, in fact, what we have been calling helper cells was an oversimplification. So when I started studying immunology some 20 years ago, I thought it would have been fantastic to study immunology 50 years ago, where there were so many things to discover, like the helper cells, because now only small things are left to be found. And yet one of the most fundamental findings in immunology, that is the fact that the cells that help B cells to produce antibodies are not what we called helper cells, but a subset that was recently described, and it is called T follicular helper. These are the only cells that can help B cells to make antibodies. They were found in 2009, and humans that do not have these cells, they cannot make antibodies. Now we know a lot about how this process takes place and how this process is regulated. And in our lab, we studied through over the years different aspects related to how this mechanism takes place, making these cells provide good help to B cells to make effective antibodies. And this is the starting point for this project. That is whether we have an opportunity to link this immune knowledge that was recently generated about how this interaction between these different cells take place and developments in new materials to find new biomaterials that could drive better immune responses, more effective in inducing antibody responses following vaccination. And we are developing this project in a team combining our expertise in immunology, and I had a lab that is related to immunology, and Elena Prudeira in the Faculty of Pharmacy here in Lisbon, and Nicholas Peppers from the University of Austin provide the expertise in nanotechnology that is necessary for this project. And in Lisbon and in Austin, it was possible to develop some of these new materials that incorporate antigens from the vaccine together with adjuvants that boost an immune response, and when administered to mice can provide a larger immune response that can be measured by a greater production of antibodies, as it is demonstrated with this chart. This is the nanoparticle with the adjuvant, and these are control groups, and these are with adjuvants without the nanoparticle, and can also be seen as how this technology can drive the production of cells that are involved in this T-cell help that lead to the production of antibodies, as it is demonstrated with this population here that is bigger than in the control groups, or this population here that is bigger than in the control groups. What we are also trying to understand is what is the mechanism that allows these materials to lead to these biological effects that translates in the production of these antibodies. And we are doing this by immunizing mice with the nanomaterials or with the traditional adjuvants, collecting the cells, the immune cells that are involved in this response, and sequencing at a single cell basis all the cells, all the genes that are being activated with this technology. And here what we are demonstrated is that the transcriptome of the cells that are involved in the response induced with the nanoparticles, and here it is mice that were immunized with the nanoparticles compared with mice with the traditional adjuvant, is completely different. And now that we are halfway through this process, we are trying to understand what is this difference and whether the knowledge of this difference can be used to refine the strategy that can lead to this boost in immune response, so that hopefully we can generate better vaccines that are also more effective within vulnerable people that are not responding as effectively to the vaccines that are currently available. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Luis. Now we will follow with the second presenter, and this time it's Bruno Figueiredo. He's the CEO and head of the R&D at Graphinest and holds a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Aveiro, Portugal. He's an expert in graphene. He was elected as a member of the 2017 industry class at Forbes 30 under 30. His main research interests are related to the synthesis and characterization of known and novel materials and their commercial applications. So, please, Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, just move here. So my name is Bruno, as you already know. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, actually, of Graphinest. To those that don't know, Graphinest is devoted to the production and implementation of graphene nanoparticles into added value products. And it turns bulky material, aka natural graphite, into a brand new material, graphene, through a proprietary technology. Before getting into the specs of the EMI shielding, I would like to let you know that this project is being brought to you by a team composed of elements coming from Graphinest, INL, and University of Minho. It also has the participation or the collaboration from Yazaki, that has been a great stakeholder, holding a great interest on graphene-based products to be used in automotive shielded cables. So I cannot forget the UT Austin people that are involved on this project as well, and the other members of the consortia that are helping Graphinest overcoming the barriers from the lab to the market. So in the next 8 minutes, I guess, I would like to make you understand why EMI shielding is important and why it needs a new approach to be implemented. Two things are simultaneously happening right now that is driving the humanity towards the necessity of a different and better EMI shielding materials. But let's just start with the one to where we all are converging right now, the current generation of communication, the 5G. So 5G generates much more data, much more faster. So it allows 20 times faster data rates. It allows, or it has 10 times lower latencies. But this has nothing to do with EMI shielding. actually what concerns to EMI shielding is the number of devices it enables. But now you may be thinking, why is this important? So imagine that you are laid down on this surgery bed, surgery room, or the procedure is being implemented by a robot with a guy 400 kilometers away from you. This may seem too ahead of our time, but it was already performed in 2014 by a Chinese telecommunication company in an animal experiment. So suddenly, the robot make an unwanted move unexpectedly. Does it make EMI shielding important to you? Or imagine that you're driving your car, your autonomous, or even just smart car, after Christmas Eve with your family, and the nearby antenna cause a glitch, electromagnetic glitch to your LiDAR system that is helping you driving your car, and you suddenly have a car crash. Does it make EMI shielding important to you? Well, GEMIS is trying to solve this kind of problems. The other thing that is happening right now, but we are still diverging in this case, is this big number. The annual gashouse emissions, 51 billion tons. So we clearly need a bold shift to modify the way we make things, we use things, and we grow things. In this sense, the GEMIS project also wants to change a little bit the way we make things and have a great focus on the way we use things, mainly focusing on the way we move around and people move around. Okay, so focusing on the way we do things. Currently, metal or the EMI shielding products are based on metals, and these are not sustainable, are unsuited for the new generation of communication, and the current one that will have much more connected devices. So from metal enclosures, metal foils, metal meshes, and even metal braiding, they are unsuited. And they are unsuited because they have energy, or they require energy and time-intensive process with high carbon footprint. And actually, they are becoming weaker as the frequency of the new generation of communication increases. For those that don't know, shielding mechanism, or the shielding, the performance is based on two mechanisms, or major two mechanisms, reflection and absorption. And as the frequency increases, the absorption increases as well. So GEMIS wants to develop, or is developing, a new approach to deliver graphene-based shielding solutions. So these solutions should combine a set of different features from effectiveness, lightness, versatility, and sustainability. Graphene has been called the most effective material for EMI shielding because a tiny amount of this material can deliver a great level of shielding. Apart from that, the GEMIS project wants to use the typical, the normal, and the bio and recycled plastics to be shaped on specific conformations by typical processing technologies, creating or allowing the use of less time, fewer steps, and lower costs as well. This project also wants to help all the stakeholders to comply with European policies and the United Nations sustainable goals. This is important because the project wants to be, or help Europe to be greener, and even help on the digital transformation during the process. So, but now let's look at the real application scenario, the one from Miyazaki. In this case, the main driver for innovation is completely different and has a little bit to do with shielding performance. Actually, they want to replace the typical metal braiding around the cable, which is well, actually, the GEMIS project will allow them to be 180 times faster by replacing metal braiding by an extrusion process, okay? So the program contribution is real clear. it's helping the team or Graphinest to demonstrate and qualify the GEMIS project for fostering competence growth as well. And simultaneously, it's using the vision of a team of engineers and science and creating the tools to manipulate and produce this kind of applications. Of course, the interdisciplinary and access to resources that once forbidden, it's paramount for this kind of applications. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we saw two I wouldn't say extremes, but one about the vaccinations and the medical applications, and then Graphinest about the utilization of nanomaterial for a very, I would say, a very impactful and necessity for the future information society. And I think these are two kind of extremes and all kind of converging in the nanoscale, right? So now we are going to the second or the third speaker, which is Alfredo Silva. He has a degree in systems engineering from the University of Minho and a PMP certification by PMI. He has vast experience in product development and management, having participated in more than 15 European and national collaborative research and development projects in several areas, ICT, energy, and health, among others, 5 of which as project coordinator. These include projects such as Being Energy, Concord, Ties Healthy, Symbiotic, and currently NanoSteam. Very thought-provoking names. Previously, Alfredo worked for 10 years as a software developer, systems analyst, and technical team manager, having been responsible for the development of several digital systems. Please, Alfredo.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. I will be presenting the NanoSteam project. This is a project that started one year and a half ago. It was a very pleasant surprise for us because we, at increased time, have an interest in health services. We have developed several projects in that area, and we had previously developed a wearable, and we had the ambitions to grow the services into wearables with more capabilities. So we were very pleasantly surprised when we were able to get funding for this project that is all about using wearables to help support people in need. Now, our consortium is composed of 6 Portuguese organizations and, of course, Texas Austin. This is a consortium that was put together by relating to the needs of interdisciplinary needs that we had for this project. So, I'm not going to present each of them. I can just say to you that they all represent very different areas. I can just say, for example, that we have University of Minho that develops the nanotechnology that we use in this project. But we also have a company like TMN that develops the materials that develops materials for wearables, and have a IPB that develops microelectronics. So there's a very large number of areas represented here. And of course, we have to be very thankful for Texas that has helped us a lot in the terms of artificial intelligence and the electronics. I will explain later. So, what is NanoSteam about? Well, we all know that in advanced societies, we are suffering from population aging. It's increasingly clear that the future there will be more and more people that need support, health support, and our health systems are not really prepared for the large numbers of people, of older people that will be coming and will need this type of care. One of the more common diseases that people of age suffer is, of course, motor difficulties. Basically, their muscles will atrophy or have several problems. And treating muscles to guarantee mobility, it's one of the things that are most time-consuming for health services, as it requires periodic sessions of electrical stimulation to strengthen the muscles and correct these kind of needs. The problem is, of course, that having these particular sessions involves the patient having to go to a care center. It involves time with professional caretakers, and multiplied by millions of people that need this type of help, this, of course, is very problematic. And this is where the NanoSTEAM project comes in. One of the priorities that we are seeing at the European level is that the European Commission is pushing for solutions that allow people to be treated in their own homes. This will be great to reduce the burden in health centers, in people that need the support, not having to go to those health centers. So basically, it's a win-win for both sides. And this project, NanoSTEAM, is based on this. NanoSTEAM is about creating a wearable that allows patients to do electrical stimulation in their own homes without the need for specialized support from healthcare professionals. And how do we do this? Now, this is where we'll need the support of nanotechnology, because one of the things that is very difficult with the electrostimulation and requires formal support is that today's technology for electrostimulation is based around wet electrodes. What are wet electrodes? There are electrodes that I don't know if anyone has ever need to do some type of treatment, but they need to put some gel in you, and then they put the electrodes on top of the gel. And this is how the electrostimulation is done. Now, this is a bit uncomfortable for people that have suffered it. It can be slightly dangerous in the sense that sometimes the system short circuits a bit, and it's painful for the user. And of course, it's more expensive because we have to use gel. The idea here for NanoSTEAM is that we can develop dry electrodes. Electrodes that can do electrostimulation without the need for a gel. Okay? This is revolutionary. It's not something that is being developed in any advanced ERL anywhere. But of course, this is also very difficult for us to do, because it requires a material that allows to be put directly in contact with the skin, that is not irritable, that can process the electrical signals, and it can also collect electrical signals. So a dual electrode. This is something, again, that is not being developed anywhere else. This is important for us for one reason. We need a dual system, a system that can provide the electrical stimulation and collect the MEAG signals, because if the system is to be done by the user on him or herself, without the professional professional carer helping, the system needs to self-regulate, and this requires both providing stimulation, but also requiring reading the biosignals so that the system can self-correct and apply the correct level of electrical stimulation. And this is where this dual system that you see here, a stimulation electrodes and an MEG acquisition component, are combined in a single unit to both read biosignals and then apply the correct electrostimulation level. So this is only possible due to the use of this type of nanotechnology. Why? Because it's surprisingly difficult to find a material that allows the electricity to pass, but it is not irritatable to the skin, and it is also biologically passive. This is where we were able to take advantage of nanotechnology developed by Minho University, one of our partners, that was able to develop a nanostructured titanium-based thin film. This is applied over the electrodes, and it provides an isolation level that it provides all of these capabilities. It does not irritate skin. It allows the reading of MEG signals. It allows the passage of current. It's very durable. So this was an excellent material that solves our problem. Without this, we couldn't have this type of dual electrode system. So this is just a small detail of how this is built. The electrodes are actually 3D printed, and then they are covered with the thin layer of titanium. This is done via nanoscale generation of the material and coating. So those components are developed separately, and then they are integrated. We make a small hole in the electrode and put the MEG signal reader inside it to create a single unit. Each of these dual-size electrodes are both covered with the titanium-based thin film that allows for these characteristics of that I described previous to work. And once the system is created, these electrodes, they are put in the vest, the wearable. The wearable goes into the leg, and when a user wants to do a treatment in their own home, they put the wearable. The wearable has the electrodes around the muscle. They then are able to control the system with an app in their cell phone, where they can then click on start. The system will be able to read the MEG signals, pass them through a set of electronics, and then using Bluetooth, send them to the cell phone, that in turn sends them to a server online. The server online is the part where the signal is analyzed, and through using artificial intelligence algorithms that are mostly developed by University of Texas. Their expertise in AI was fantastic because it allows us to interpret the MEG signs in real time and to then convert them back into commands for the wearable, meaning that we can do customizable treatment sessions, and the user does not need the immediate intervention of any professional. Of course, the system also then keeps a history of the treatments so that a professional that is on his computer can access them on the server and can see how the whole sessions are being treated. So this is not 100% autonomous, but each session does not require the involvement of a professional. The professional only needs to every now and then check on the history online of how the user is doing and if the treatment is working and if the artificial algorithms need some type of customization of some parameterization for that particular user. So why was this project so important in terms of multidisciplinarity? Because we will not be being able to do this without nanotechnology that solves the problem of the dry electrodes, without support of UTAA, because they're the ones that they have developed our artificial intelligence that allows to analyze these biosignals, and without it we wouldn't be able to do the customized sessions, or otherwise the system would not work. So each of these steps was required a different expertise, and we are very thankful for the opportunity to develop this with this consortium. And of course, I also want to thank Texas University for another reason, because they also bring an outsider's point of view on this. Because, well, to be honest, we were thinking in one level, because we here, our Portuguese companies are, let's say, customized to a smaller market. When we arrived and start talking with University of Texas, they had a much broader view, and it helped us a lot in basically customizing our solution to provide support for much more people, and to be able to scale up the final wearable when we validate it, hopefully in the next year. So thank you all for this and for the opportunity to present our project.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. I think your project shows what I think is one of the beauties with nanotechnology, and that is that by having a challenge or a need, you can start to take principle of what you have in the lab and then tailor a solution to that. So it's a kind of the generic enabling character of the knowledge. So it's not the traditional way that you develop a certain technology to a high technology readiness level, and then you need to have a market readiness level and a market adaptation, so which take long time. So this is more about having a challenge or the need that you identify or someone else identify, and ask you to provide a solution which can go, well, very quickly, although of course all developments takes time, right? So, but nevertheless, I think this shows the beauty of the, I would say, the character of nanotechnology. So thank you very much. Now we are having the last presentation of this panel. This is Philippe Fernandez. He is a postdoc researcher fellow at the University of Minho and invited auxiliary professor at the University of Coimbra. He received his PhD degree in mechanical engineering in 2014 from the University of Coimbra with industrial support, thereby gaining a large experience in the design of new materials and manufacturing processes for thin films. He is the PI of UT Austin Portugal's project MC-Tool21 at University of Coimbra, and also a Marie Curie Fellow at the Advanced Materials Group of the Czech Technical University in Prague. His research interests include hard-facing coatings, thin solid films, thermal spraying coats, oxidation resistance, self-lubrication, and wear resistance coatings suitable for high temperature applications. Please, Philippe. Let's welcome Philippe.
Okay. Thank you, dear Chairman, and good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to the people in Austin. First of all, now I am in Coimbra, so I am a researcher in Coimbra and also invited professor there. And today I am speaking here about the MC-Tool21 project. So this is an industrial project, and there are some partners involved. The main goal of this project is the development of cutting tools, which can efficiently machine what we call hard-to-machine materials. You will know what is it in a moment. Okay, I would like also to let you know that this project came from one exploratory project which was run on the past and which was financed, supported by the UT Austin call or program. On that project, what you intend to do was the development of coating systems which could work at high temperature, but without harmful lubrication. Harmful lubrications are, for example, oils, and we need to remove them from the market. So this is something that when you look to the current industry, aerospace, automotive, even health industry, there are components which need to be built from specific materials. I have here some examples, these titanium alloys, why they are using this automotive or aerospace industry, because they are extremely high strength, but they are also light. We have also the case of this titanium can be used for these medical devices, prostheses, due to their biocompatibility. So what is in common between these materials is that they are very hard to machine materials. When you look by the eyes of these tool makers or machining industries, what they want is that these tools, machining tools, can survive for longer times and can machine as much as possible the material in the minimum period of time. Of course, that's when you look to the eyes again to the industry, when you increase this velocity of the cutting tools, we would believe that you could increase the material removal rates. So the removal of material from these machining parts. However, there are problems. Why? Because when you increase this cutting speed, the temperature generated on the contact and the stress are extremely high, and it degrades the corners of the tool. So one solution which is being applied, and is the most applied to decrease the friction on the contact and the temperature, is the use of liquid lubrication. So liquid lubrication based on oils, however, they are harmful for the environment and also are to disposal. And therefore, there are normatives to remove this liquid lubricant from the market. Okay, so, and in that case, you need to find sustainable and more green materials to replace this liquid lubrication, okay? This is actually being done by nanotechnologies. What is being done currently in these tools, this is the application of thin film, so it's a portion of small material which is deposited over the tool in such a way that it can make the tool last longer. And in this field is being developed what is called self-lubricant coatings, okay? So are coatings which can provide self-lubrication properties, I mean low friction. When you look to this type of coatings, what is being done is a combination between two different materials. A high oxidation resistance material with lubricious material, which are these dots which I am putting there. These dots of the lubricious material, when exposed at high temperature, starts to diffuse to the surface, created what we call low friction layer. So this friction layer is a solid material which can provide friction on the contact, and therefore you decrease friction and don't use liquid lubrication, which is harmful for the environment. However, when you go test this in real applications, there are a big problem, which is this fast diffusion of this lubricious phase to the surface. So this tool, in fact, can provide low friction and can work in the absence of liquid lubrication, but they cannot survive for long periods of time because of this fast diffusion of the lubricious element. So what is the solution? Is to control this lubricious element diffusion to the surface. So this was done in the exploratory project. He could achieve this controlled diffusion of the lubricious element. By preliminary tests, we saw also that these coating systems that we developed could provide low lubrication and extend the lifetime of machining tools. And therefore, with this knowledge that we were carrying this exploratory project, we are able to propose the MC2 project. So the MC2 project is constituted by a company which is InnovaTools, a German tool company with a subsidiary company in Portugal. This company is dedicated to the fabrication of cutting tools for special materials like titanium alloys. And then we joined as partners University of Coimbra, which is a specialist in development of these thin films by nanotechnologies. University of Minho, which is a specialist on the simulation at nanoscale design. And finally, UT Austin at Texas, which will make the bridge between this nano simulation and with the macro simulation. I will give details here in this moment. So here is the hierarchical strategy of our project. What we really wanted to do is to upscale the coatings that you developed previously in the exploratory project. So this will be then industrial chambers at the University of Coimbra. Of course, that when you speak about industrial chambers and the positions of these films by nanotechnologies, in this case sputtering technologies, we see that there are no homogeneous distribution of this film over the complex surface of the tools. So in that case, as can have different, as in the tools, these machining tools, they are complex, and you can have different thickness and chemical compositions in different zones of the tool. Is necessary to do simulation at nanoscale. Why? Because the tools works at different temperatures and under different stress conditions, and it's important to understand how different chemical compositions, different structures influence the diffusion of this material to the surface to provide this low friction. Of course, then you need to migrate for a macro scale. So I mean, after having these upscaled films over the tools, what is needed to do is design geometry of these tools in such a way that they could last long. On the other hand, it's also important to predict what are the machining conditions which you should use in such a way that these tools can survive for longer times. Having these tools optimized, of course, they should be tested in real conditions and compared or benchmarked with the best commercial tools which are currently on the market. Well, of course, this project has impact directly in the enterprise. So if you in principle, we'll be able to provide these solutions, low friction coatings for the leader enterprise, which is Innova Tools. So it will allow the enterprise conquer new markets. Of course, that there are also some impacts which are, we can avoid the use of these liquid lubricants. So we will have here environmental friendly coatings, and this will also have impact on the life of the human being. Thank you.
So now we have heard these 4 different presentations, and I think it illustrates quite well the breadth of nanotechnology. The first one is, if you remember, was about the, let's say, antibody generation and utilization. The second one was about the electromagnetic shielding effects, right? And then we had about the activation of, or helping patients with impaired motion, right? And then now the hard coating in the end here. So it kind of represents a very wide perspective, right? So before we go in and ask questions and have a discussion here, maybe is there some question from the audience that you would like to ask any of the presenters now before we continue to discuss? This seems not to be an immediate question, at least, so let's start to discuss. So this is all about interdisciplinarity and the utilization of nanotechnology in different sectors or in different verticals. So in your mind, when we speak about this interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity, what does it mean for you? What is the kind of, let's call it the obstacle or the good thing with it? So can you give me a short comment? Do we have Luis with us from? Okay, there they are. Good, very good. So this is also for you, Luis, right? So maybe we start with you, Luis. What do you say? I mean, what does the interdisciplinarity mean for you?
Sure. I think this is a very important question because for the type of the technology and application that we are developing, certainly it is critical to have people with different backgrounds and different ways to look at the problems. And in one hand, we have the people that have the knowledge to develop the materials that are most adequate for this purpose. And then we have the limitations of the application into physiological conditions where not the entire breadth of technical possibilities can be used because there are limitations regarding the human delivery of this type of technologies. And for example, the 2 technologies that we are testing one that requires the administration by injection, similar to the normal vaccines. And we have another technology from Nicholas Pepper's lab that is to be delivered by the oral route. Each one of these technologies have their own constraints. There are advantages and disadvantages between the two, and we can only know what will be most suitable after we can do the tests and see what comes out in vivo systems that mimic the human physiology. So I think that it is really important to have people from different backgrounds that can share the same language, understand the common problems, and can find a solution that brings together these different expertise.
And you said to share the same language, right? And I would like to just to pick a little bit about that, and the question that will go to you very soon. So I think when we learn subjects in school, even at university, we are having different education, and we're having different kind of language. So the biologists learn a certain language, the chemist another language, the physicist a third language, etc. And when we come to the nanoscale, when we meet each other, when we describe what is happening at the nanoscale, we are using different languages. And you need to melt them down in order to understand each other. And I think this process of melting these languages down and then creating this kind of, let's call it the same language, is a very creative process in itself that kind of paved the way for further possibilities to come up with new, let's call it new dimensions. So it's a little what we sometimes say, to think out of the box, because when you meet people with different disciplinarities and speak about the same thing, and you speak from different edges or different sources, then you are actually into a domain which is a bit out of your comfort zone, each individually, although you have your own comfort zone. And I think this kind of meeting out in the non-comfort zone, principally, I mean, like when you want to express something that is very complicated in one discipline for another one that is not in that discipline, you need to have a very specific way of articulating that. And I think this kind of articulation is binding us all together, and which is really the enabling character, which means that what we discuss in particular can easily be translated to another sector without going through the standard kind of development in each different verticals. Okay, this was a long comment about what you said, Luis. But so let's give the word over to you, Bruno.
For us, interdisciplinarity is everything. And I say this because we are market-driven at Graphiness, right? So we need people from the lab and people on the market. So they have to converge to the same place. So I'm not developing anything that the market doesn't want. Mm-hmm. So I have my business guy telling us how to approach and what are the requirements from the stakeholders, and then I deconstruct to the lab. So I need electronics guys, I need both micro and nano, I need physicists, I need chemical guys, and chemical engineering as well. So interdisciplinary in our case, like I said, it's everything.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's this kind of holistic perspective in a way that you need to integrate different specialities and different thoughts, right? So, yes. And from you, Alfredo, what do you say?
Well, I'll have to agree, because we are a small company that is growing fast. And what we notice is the more ambitious we are with our services, the more we need to bring other people with different skill sets to be able to transform our vision into actual products. Because let's be honest, today it's very difficult to develop almost anything. It doesn't involve a lot of skills. And and of course, we cannot possibly hire people from every skill. So cooperation and bringing together consortia where they bring us all those type of skills and opinions is very important. And this is not just at the technical level to create something, mm-hmm. but it's also at the actual commercial level. Because, for example, in our project, we had the idea that we wanted to have a product that was mass produced, mm-hmm. but then our partner that is expert in electron simulation said, okay, but this is more complicated because you need to correctly position the electrodes. That requires a certain type of fiber. But then our partner that actually produces wearables said, okay, but we don't have many options with that level. And before you know it, we have a chain of needs and requirements that end up altering or forces us to reach some type of compromise to make sure that our vision results in a product is not exactly what you expected in the beginning, but can actually be better or different when you start asking the opinions of everybody that understands of the business. So it's actually a very interesting and interactive process that could not be possible without interdisciplinarity.
Right. So would you say that the kind of interdisciplinarity kind of fosters the team spirit, working together for the same need? I mean, the market people, the commercial people, the scientists or the research people have different views, right? But there is one common goal, right?
Exactly, and that's why I'm speaking as a project manager. The most difficult thing in a project is not the technical challenges, it's to manage the people. And getting a team that talks with each other and is able to share opinions and not try to force their opinions on others, it might be difficult, but when you achieve it, you can achieve fantastic things, because you get synergies when everybody cooperates and get those different points of opinion. And when that happens, we usually end up with products that are actually better than the ones we had initially envisioned.
Right. The sum is more than the individual sum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And from you, Philippe, what do you say in this?
Yes, I absolutely agree with the opinion of all of us, of you. In fact, this multiplicity is very important. Of course, that having multiplicity sometimes is difficult to understand the language of the different skills which the different partners have. So, and this is the difficult thing to manage on the project. So, is understanding the language of each other. If I'm working at macro scale and someone is working on nanoscale, sometimes the language is not clear for us, and you need to make an effort in such a way that we can combine the things in such a way that you can reach the final goal of the achievement of the project that we want to go.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to touch a bit this with the different languages and so on. I will just give you one thing that I experienced myself many years ago when I started to work with people from the biochemistry field. I'm a physicist by training, and then we were in a meeting and we were already friends, and then we started to discuss about a scientific project, scientific issue. And then the biochemist people, they started to speak about that the substrate that they add to something. And as a physicist, I mean, substrate is what you build on. That is what you start with, and then you build something on the substrate. But for chemists, substrate is what you add, and then the reaction takes place. And it was kind of, I mean, we don't speak the same thing. I mean, the physicists couldn't understand the picture that the chemist thought about. And I think this is a good example of how the language is the same, but the meaning is very different. And here is something that we need to meet and talk. So have you experienced this kind of, how can I say, this kind of moment where you suddenly realize that your friend was speaking about something using the language that you recognize, but you didn't understand what he was speaking or she was speaking about? Have you experienced that? Maybe we start with you now, going the other way around.
In fact, yes. Even in the current project, well, we are working at nanoscale, this production of films, but we have a partner working on this nano simulation, which is molecular dynamics and different function theory. Sometimes the concepts that they use, I know what is the meaning at macro scale, but at nanoscale it is totally different.
Right.
So, and we need to find here a bridge between the partners in such a way that you can understand each other, and in the end you can understand what you are doing, in fact.
Right, yeah. Thank you. And have you the similar experience?
It happens to me a few times. The last time was actually in NanoSteam as well, because again, when I talked in our presentation about University of Austin bringing a different reality, This actually applies in this case, because we had this issue that our scientific partner said, okay, we need to collect data from several older people to parameterize the artificial intelligence, okay? And then he asked us, he said, okay, I may be able to bring 10, 20 people, etc. And then we go to Austin, and the expert in artificial intelligence says, okay, can you get me 200 people? And you are like, what? Why? And of course, they have the problem because there are a lot more, let's say, diversity in the United States. They have a lot more parameters, and that actually getting artificial intelligence to work in everybody, it's a lot difficult in a larger country that is a small one where people are more uniform. And this was something we didn't even consider. So there was something that, whoa, you are right. We have to change our expectations and our vision of this. So this is exactly one of those situations.
Right. Yeah. And Bruno, from your...
Well, in my case, I don't think I have anything to add. Well, just personally, the first time I heard about nanotech, it was explained to me by the different colors of gold. So gold can be other colors than gold.
Right, yes.
So for me, at first sight, it was very confusing to check exactly that. So just to compare your situation with mine.
Right.
But in this project, we are not observing this kind of issues, at least not directly. What I can say is maybe sometimes our imagination for shielding is being different from the ones that we are discussing with partners and not only the consortium but all the stakeholders, and that it has to do with the shielding level and also with the frequency that we would like to shield. But we are trying to frame it a little bit, but that's mostly here.
Thank you. And Luis, what is your experience on this topic?
Yeah, I think that most important than that, I'd like to take something that Bruno said, is the vision, to have a common goal, to when we can understand what each other is saying, each other from the different discipline, we can start producing what if understandings that we cannot do in isolation. Because if I do not understand the other person, I cannot ask, what if we do this like that, can you achieve this? And this is a click. It is a moment when you can understand enough of the other's language, if you want, Lars, taking your point, to start being able to play with the other field, not only with our field, but with the other field. And this is a transition that happens at a particular moment when we can start sharing these and can start bringing into our own vision things that were not from our own background. And I think this is when things start to get interesting.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I think nanotechnology has been around now for many, many years, right? And it has been having a lot of hype around it. And in your perspectives, do you think this, I mean, sometimes the hype is kind of creating artificial possibilities that has been kind of broadcasted widely, that nanotechnology will revolutionize the world and will bring a lot of new things that nanotechnology embedded into your products or your ideas. So maybe
I can start?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting question. I was actually discussing this topic yesterday with my business manager because we are preparing a proposal to the EIC Accelerator, a very famous program in Europe. And he was saying to me that we should avoid the term nanoparticle. And he was saying that because he has afraid that people not directly working in nanotechnology can assume it has hazards. So this is a common topic inside GraphNest. Sometimes it depends on the audience.
Yes.
If we are talking to someone that knows what we have been doing, what is graphene, what graphene can bring to a certain product, of course we don't avoid the term nanotechnology and what technology has to offer. But sometimes we need to know a little bit better our audience to make sure that we are not jeopardizing, again, our market position.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's mostly it. Of course, we are being very cautious on that.
Yeah. Okay. And from you, Alfredo, have you experienced this also? That
well, not directly, but our position usually in this type of things is that the end users don't usually care a lot about technologies. Of course, again, depends on the audience, because we deal mostly with health products. So of course, if you are talking with a doctor, he does care. But for most part, like this type of wearables that we are developing and similar products that we have developed before, the people don't usually care if it says nanotechnology or not, and in fact, it can even cause some a reaction because people are not very informed about it. They usually care what does to them. So our approach is always, okay, you put this, it's going to do this, this, and this. And the technologies are something that are like a black box. We can talk with about it if they ask, but they usually don't care. So it's better to keep it, let's say, a secret, and not to, let's say, arise some bias that some people have against nanotechnology or even other stuff like that.
I don't know if I can add something.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
In my case, it's well, we have two cases. One of them, it's the use of graphene on masks. So in Canada, there was an immediately triggered process to avoid masks that use graphene. And actually, here in Portugal as well, we saw a lady claiming that the vaccines have graphene inside, so nanotech inside. So she spreads the word everywhere, and people were starting to say, well, be cautious because graphene is inside vaccines. So this is the kind of thing we should, or we'd like to avoid. Okay, just to add that.
And from you, Philip.
So yes, I'm a guy from academy, so I am not too much industrial, but my perception is that the industry, they don't speak about nanotechnology. So the clients of the enterprise, what they want is just a product which works. So for example, in this field of machining tools, which I presented, what the client wants is the blue tool or the yellow tool. They just don't care about what is inside. They just want that it works, it stands for a long time without any problem. In the field of, in our field of academy, of course, the word nanotechnology is extremely important nowadays. So we need to manipulate the materials in such a way that you get new functionalities and in such a way that you can get new products which can make our life easier.
Right. And from your perspective, Liz, have you, been so, yeah, please.
I think that there has been a trend in our field in that the field is coming closer to requiring a demonstration of these nanomaterials in physiological conditions in order to assert its relevancy for human health. While maybe 10 years ago, many publications could be seen where these nanomaterials were assessed in non-physiological conditions. Now, in the advances that we see in the field require a validation in more physiological conditions. And this also requires that experts in nanomaterials to start working together with experts in vivo, physiology, and so on, for the faster validation of these technologies in conditions that are closer to the final application.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, another thought about this with nanotechnology. I mean, first of all, you can say, why do we have nanotechnology now? I mean, what is the reason? We didn't have nanotechnology 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Why now?
Because we need it.
We need it, okay.
To solve problems.
Yes.
Otherwise, we couldn't.
Right. And when did we kind of learn that there was a world there at the nano scale, so to say, that we could use? What was the breakthrough for that in your view, so to say?
Well, In my view, I come from a computer world. Right. In my view, it was basically the need to ever smaller transistors that drove the need to miniaturization and develop further and further techniques to build things in ever smaller scales. And this in turn ended up spilling out to other applications beyond microprocessors.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a famous sentence which is in the shoulders of the giants, right?
Right.
So we are just doing that. I think we are taking advantage of the knowledge that previous guys here were given to us, and then we keep up researching and solving problems with a new perspective, which happens to be nano.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, one of the kind of let's say the stepping stone for nanotechnology was the physicist Rick Feynman when he had a very famous talk during Christmas in the United States. He said there's plenty of room at the bottom, and it was about a predictive thing, saying, well, you know, we could make machines that are very, very small, and they would behave like big machines, but at a smaller scale, and then giving the kind of feeling that it would be possible to integrate lot of knowledge into a very, very tiny part of some reading material if everything was done at the nanoscale. And this was at that time totally, no one thought about that. Right? So this was a wow kind of thing. This was really what if, as you say, Luis. What if we could do this? What would then happen? And this kind of started, of course, discussion among the academics about that. And then what you said, I think, is important, that the semiconductor industry wanted to have smaller and smaller transistors. By having smaller and smaller transistors, you needed to have microscopes in order to show or see what you actually try to do. And with the development of the microscopes, you started to understand, well, things are happening at the nanoscale, sometimes not in the predictable way that you thought in the beginning, and then you start to understand how the material actually behaves by having a microscopy. So I think the microscopy enabled us to actually be able to do things at the nanoscale, and then that could lead to then different applications in different fields. So, and then of course we could use the microscopes to understand how things nature works, right, and how things in our environments works, etc. And I think what we said before about this holistic perspective of nanotechnology, the kind of necessity of understanding each other, and also understanding that with the help of technology, we could actually make things that will have a lower footprint than in the present kind of production, which will reduce, of course, and mitigate the climate change, is very important things. So I have some, before we end, I have some questions from the audience here. I just need to open again. Yes, here is the question from Barbara Pino. Even though you all work with nanotechnology, your fields of work are quite different from each other. What is the hardest part of working with researchers from such diverse fields? So this is the first question. Then the second question from the same author. The most recent Nobel Prize in nanotechnology happened in 2016. This we can question later, but yeah. A Nobel Prize in chemistry for the design and synthesis of molecular machines. Do you think nanotechnology will show up more and more in Nobel laureates? So, two questions. One, what is the hardest part of working with researchers from such diverse fields? And the second thing, do you think nanotech will show up more in the Nobel Prizes in the future? So, who would like to start? Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know.
Yep, go ahead.
So I can answer. Well, the hardest thing I think we already answered. It's about speaking the same language, and understand each other towards the same objective or the same goal. That's the hardest thing for sure. Sometimes to match the knowledge, that's also difficult because we are working with such interesting people that keeping up the level is hard. And I do think that more Nobel Prizes will come related to nanotech, for sure.
Right.
Well, I think that, again, I have to agree, because the main problem is that when you start thinking about in terms of nanotechnology, you start thinking things in a certain, let's say, mechanical way of how everything interacts. But sometimes there's not necessarily what we want at the macro scale. So we had a bit of a problem where we wanted our electrodes to have a certain characteristics, but then the person developing this said, okay, but maybe you can do this, and they have more characteristics, but then we have to ask, okay, but it's going to increase the price. So, okay, so let's say that my main observation, and of course I'm an engineer myself, so I'm talking against me myself, but sometimes we have the tendency to see things a bit too mechanical and too in terms of what is possible, not in terms of then how it's going to translate in actual products and which are affordable. So this is my main concern regarding talking with technicians. And the second question about Nobel Prizes, it's important to realize that Nobel Prizes usually trail the discoveries about 10, 20 years. So yeah, the Nobel Prizes you see now are for achievements 10, 20 years, 30 ago. So yeah, I absolutely believe that decades from now, most of them will be about nanotechnology.
Right. Philippe?
Yes, so my thoughts are the same. So the problem here, when we speak about different languages, is the understanding between different scales. And for these Nobel Prizes, for sure, because the developments at nanotechnology scale is very high in the health industry, in the materials industry, sensors. And this is going ahead so fast, so soon we will have new Nobel Prize for sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are prizes in physics, chemistry, and medicine, etc. So there is no one in nanotechnology, of course, but I think the things will be in these different disciplines that this will show up. So, Luis, you would like to add something about this question?
Yes, I think that the technology is what enables us to do things. In response to the previous question from Lars, I think we have been working with nanomaterials before we start claiming they were nanomaterials, like virus, like particles, liposomes, and so on. But the technology allowed us to be more precise in the use of this scale. And I think that is the reason why it is the ability to do different things that will make it possible that solutions will come arising from these nanomaterials, and it will be reflected in Nobel Prizes and in the day-to-day life and the day-to-day use of these sort of solutions.
We have a second question from the audience, and that is a question coming from YouTube, from Nikal Yentilal. And the question is, which are the best tools to use when modeling this type of work? It's a very broad question, of course, right? So I don't know, but you are probably using some modeling tools. Can you expand about that?
Well, in our case, I'm not the right guy to talk about it, but yes, we are having a specific task to model the shielding efficiency on a certain geometry. Typically, to be faster, we measure shielding in a planar geometry, but we like to have it on measuring or predicting in different geometries. So yes, we're going to use models to do so, but I'm not the right guy to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm also not the ideal person to ask about, but my understanding is that they use a lot of models to determine the characteristics of the final product depending on the inputs. So what has happened is that we ask, okay, we want this coating to not be aggressive to the skin and to be conductive, etc., and they put it in the model, and they are able to narrow down what type of products and what type of construction they need to achieve that type of goal. So yes, we use those models.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And in your case?
In the case of this project in particular, it again depends on the scale. We can do simulations at nanoscale and macro scale.
Right.
And you will get different properties. For example, when you speak about nanoscale, you can get, for example, diffusion coefficients. But these diffusion coefficients will be not the same at macro scale. So it is necessary to do this type of simulations, nanoscale and macro scale, in such a way that in our case, we can understand the behavior of the materials. On the other hand, in the specific case of the tools, in such a way that you can predict how they wear out or how long they can survive, you never can use nano simulation, I mean, at nanoscale. You need to do macro scale. So in this macro scale, there are finite elements which can be used. There are commercial codes, which like Abacus, Simulate and others, and at nanoscale, it depends also what you want to simulate, but normally you use DFT, it is differential function theory or molecular dynamics. And even this DFT and molecular dynamics allows to simulate different characteristics of the materials.
Yeah, thank you. From Luis, from your side, do you use modeling tools in your work?
We use modeling tools, yes, and we use a very diverse range. So I think that the best tool is really to use the brain and try to find out from the wide range of available solutions what is the one that is more suitable to your particular need. And I think there is not a single answer that can address the diversity of applications and the diversity of problems that you need. So you really need to use your brain and find what is the best one.
So any questions from the audience here in the room? Let me see if there is something coming from... No, there was nothing here. So then I would like to say a big thank you to all of you that presented here today. Also you, Luis, who was with us digitally. And thanks a lot. And a big applaud for the presenters.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your questions and exciting insights. I invite all participants to leave the stage and return to their seats in the first row. To wrap up our conference's first day, we'd like to welcome Manuel Eckert, Minister of Science, Technology and Higher Education, to address our community.
Eu não sei porque é que estão a bater palmas, que eu ainda não falei. Thank you very much. I believe we should speak in English. For those that are the other side of the screen, I was just wondering why they were applauding, because I didn't say nothing yet. But thank you very much for asking me to come here. As you may understand, we do believe that these international partnerships have become very critical in the development of Portuguese science, of Portuguese basic and fundamental sciences, but also in a way to explore new ideas over the Atlantic, and particularly also to facilitate new opportunities and the access of new markets. Overall, after almost 15 years since we started this venture with 3 major American universities, today we have the guarantee that they in fact allow to build what I would call networks of opportunity, to create new opportunities, certainly for science, but also for new entrepreneurial projects. And most of the time we know that a few of these entrepreneurial projects do convey companies which start small and after a while may get very large. And actually over the lack or the portfolio of partnerships and tens or even hundreds of projects, today we know that we have also already large companies, large engineering companies operating in Portugal, which have been in one or several ways the results of the broad range of spillovers created by these partnerships. Some of them have created from specific projects, others from specific students, which is master or PhD students, and also others have created the conditions, particularly for entrepreneurs and technology-based entrepreneurs and research-based entrepreneurs to access particularly VCs and markets, which are very much different from those which we have in Southern European countries, and through those contacts have actually created companies which today have completely reoriented their ideas. There are many examples. Certainly a critical example is Fidzai, which actually was in Austin, Texas, where some of their CEO, Nuno Sebastião, met a number of venture capitalists and other risk and investment funds, which actually have identified the skills and the competencies they were using in the energy fields to use in other fields, particularly to detect financial fraud. And so it is particularly the idea of building up an ecosystem of training, research, access to markets, access to new ideas that we have provided this portfolio of projects, and that over the last few years we have particularly expanded, in particular the UT Austin Portugal Program, which today, as you know, counts for particularly 11, say, flagships projects, which have been funded with overall 20 million euros for a period between 3 and 5 years, in areas which are very much concentrated on nanotechnologies and nanosciences, but with applications which range from nanosatellites to areas of new diagnostics for us. For instance, I believe tomorrow the new PET system in collaboration with the MD Anderson Hospital, particularly for cancer protonics, will be also described here. There is one area, though, which I would like to emphasize, apart from the development of new sensors or new diagnostics or new ways to look to nanotechnology, is that most of these technologies, sensor systems, are being used and will be used to generate more and more data. Actually, all the projects in the UT Austin partnership associated with the development of components for nanosatellites, their ultimate goal is to produce more data, and particularly high resolution and very high resolution data from low orbit nanosatellites. And in processes we will have more data, and more data which will need more and more computing facilities to be produced. And actually it was also within the UT Austin Portugal program that for the last 15 years we have developed a specific partnership, particularly with the Austin Advanced Computing Center, so-called TAC, Texas Advanced Computing Center, which gave rise a few years ago to the Minho Advanced Computing Center, and I see here Rui Oliveira, the director of MACO, an overall infrastructure from the Portuguese Science Foundation, which has allowed us to install the first supercomputer in Portugal 3 years ago, and now building the capacity to, within the European framework, to really installing a second supercomputer, phasing out the first one and phasing in a new structure within the European high-performance computing facilities. So it was not only a learning trajectory through the Austin partnership, but it was also one way to build up our performance within Europe. So in general, there are many different ways to acknowledge these type of partnerships. They have not been easily explained in all the different issues, and we know that they bring a number of issues, particularly in political and strategic issue, because the funding which is provided to, in this case, UT Austin, is not given to the Portuguese universities, and the key question is always to guarantee, and I open this debate because it is very important in strategic terms for a country with the amount of resources that Portugal have for research, which is always limited, the way we, as the Portuguese research community, really mobilize every single second and time and energy to make sure that all the investment done in UT Austin is also gain for the Portuguese research and for Portugal in general. Again, it was also very well under this idea that UT Austin a few years ago gave to Portugal a supercomputer, because they also know that they also gain out of these partnerships. And that is also our way to look at these strategic partnerships, is always to be and to participate in a win-win relationships with our partners. So today we know clearly that the University of Texas at Austin is a strategic partner for Portugal and the Portuguese research community. We know that they gain out of this collaboration, and we know that we also gain out of this collaboration, and it is this mutual understanding that we can benefit certainly scientific knowledge through new ideas, particularly in the areas of fundamental research, but also for new ideas which can be implemented in terms of entrepreneurial projects. A number of people has been particularly associated with making of these successful stories, and to try to make sure that every single idea will become a successful stories. And I would like certainly to acknowledge all of those that are participating actively in this process, and certainly in this regard to acknowledge José Manuel Mendoza, which now coordinates these partnerships, and all his team, which day after day, week after week, they are making sure that the project rolls out, and also particularly the team in or at UT Austin. Now that we are again returning to normal situations, either here in Europe or in the United States, my appeal today has been or will be very much oriented to exchanging people again and organizing joint initiatives, although all these conferences can be run, and we have been forced to use digital technologies. My understanding is that the physical and the presence of students, researchers from both sides have been particularly important. Actually, if we look back, all the success stories, either from the partnership with UT Austin or with many other different strategic partners, have particularly been associated with informal meetings, with face-to-face relationships, with interns in research labs, in a number of different ways to convey and to mobilize people from different sides. And therefore, my appeal and my main reason to be here is that, again, virtual conferences are a very interesting way, but please keep doing the exchange of people, which we know have been particularly broken over the last 2 years, and I believe it's time to go back to this continuous exchange, also in the business sector, but particularly by sending people there, by contacting entrepreneurs, by bringing here researchers and students from UT Austin, and more facilitating this mobility of ideas through people, as well as the development of joint initiatives beyond those which have been planned. We also know that all the success stories out of these partnerships and others have been stories which were not initially planned, and therefore this serendipity of these processes make part of the success of these partnerships. But in order this happen, really we need to convey environments for exchanging of ideas and for the crossover of particularly new and disruptive ideas. I see here a lot of people from INL, Lars, Paulo, and apart from the advanced computing or all the other areas involved, I believe now we face a unique opportunity in the area of nanosciences or nanotechnology, particularly also associated with the so-called climate change environments we live, but also we force ourselves to change in the coming decades. Among many other ideas, the overall challenge of moving towards electric mobility will certainly require a better understanding of smart energy networks, and we are here a place, and actually Eckert is leading at the world level many of the new developments in that area, with new areas of advanced materials, in particular for the development of lithium cells, which may convey a new scenario for the batteries for electric vehicles. And this is a topic which I believe all of us together will not be enough to make sure that we speed up the developments in a way that we can better foster this idea, also because there are lithium resources in the Iberia Peninsula which could be used particularly also to sustain a full value chain of activities in this area. And certainly I believe that the strategic partnership built over the years with INL and in the advanced materials area could benefit from this partnership. So I'm also speaking for those in the other side of the screen, and in particular in UT Austin, to essentially mobilize ideas across the development of the necessary understanding of the basic scientific conditions which will allow probably the atomic deposition of lithium particles or the necessary technologies to make this interesting idea of electric mobility, but also above all a full integrated system which will be sustainable and therefore do require an holistic view of the full value chain for sustainable mobility. Certainly, if we succeed in a scenario of an increased competition, also in the Iberia Peninsula, but in general in Europe and at the world level, if we succeed out of this collaboration with UT Austin, I'm sure this will guarantee a larger and much increased development of scientific research institutions, but also of the economic conditions to do more and to bring more people for this type of ventures. So I thank you very much, you all, for joining this conference, for enjoying the projects, and to make sure that we keep stock of the progress made and return as fast as possible to the presential meetings, to the joint workshops, to the exchange and mobility of people. And my presence here is particularly to acknowledge the work has been done, but also to appeal for a fast recovery of the presential meetings and exchange of people, which have been the basis of these strategic partnerships, particularly with the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you very much, and thank you to those which have made this conference possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow we will host another roundtable, this time about health as a fertile ground for interdisciplinarity. We will also host our exclusive thematic masterclasses, so join us tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. That's Lisbon time. For those of you joining us here at FILP, feel free to grab a snack downstairs, and see you tomorrow.